What if one painful moment in your own life led to an innovation that could change the quality of life for millions quietly suffering from a problem that no one talks about? Welcome back to Industry Ignited, the show where we explore the founders, disruptors, and innovators who are reshaping the future of industrial, manufacturing, and medical technologies. I'm your host, Dr. Leeanne Aguilar. And today's guest is Zack Lyon, Chief Executive Officer at H3Pelvic Therapy Systems, a seasoned industrial designer and engineer with over 30 years of experience and 40 plus U.S. patents. Zack, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Leanne.
Now, I know you've spent decades creating innovations across aerospace, automotive, EVs, and medical devices. Looking back, what early experiences or values shaped the way you think about solving problems in building technology?
Great question. Leanne, early experiences in product design at the NC State School of Design, which is my alma mater, having worked with many industrial designers such as Ross Lovegrove, Scott Wilson, and the like. Many of these folks espouse the KISS principle, or the keep it stupid simple principle. This drives how I like to design and engineer, and that usually forces me to focus on just the facts. Ultimately, any excellent product, when executed right, they're functional pieces of art that humans tend to identify with. Think Apple. Many engineers tend to overcomplicate solutions, as simple solutions are really harder to build, but they tend to have less ways to go wrong and have serious staying power in the markets if you get it right. I reiterate, Apple. That foundational thinking is driving our H3Pelvic line of future solutions.
So just keeping things simple, basically streamlined,
Yes.
and so there aren't too many broken parts or parts that can break and go wrong.
Modes of failure, correct.
Yeah, exactly. Now, your path into pelvic therapy wasn't planned. I understand it was born from a personal health crisis. Can you describe the moment where frustration turned into invention and when you realized I might just have solved something big, not only for me, but for others?
Yeah, sure. As a former electrical vehicle system engineer, my charge at that time was to manage thermal energy and joule heating, which is a byproduct of fast charging your car. And they can be very dangerous if it's not properly managed. You know those EV cars that occasionally catch on fire and they're extremely hard to put out.
Right.
Well, I was charged to figure out a way to move that thermal energy quickly to a safer location from the point of origination. I was working across multiple time zones for this electronics company. COVID hit. Remote was an edict from my company, and they pushed it harder across working across time zones. In my case, early in the morning at 4 a.m. in Germany, 8 to 5 p.m. in the Americas, and up to 9 p.m. with our China and Indian counterparts all in one day. I mean, it was some brutal working experiences, and sitting all that time, I personally suffered another massive hemorrhoidal issue for more than the fourth time. And I couldn't think straight to do my job. I went to go see the clinician who tells me I have a stage 4 hemorrhoid. They could do something about it, but you wait a little too long, you're going to have to suffer through it. So
Wow.
that was very frustrating. And it sent me down the pathway into the shop to create something ugly and crude to try to solve the problem. And then once I realized how well that worked, that really sent me down the rabbit hole of further discovery as to who else could benefit and what other types of conditions were people suffering from that might benefit. And of course, women have a lot more going on than men do, but we both suffer in very various different amounts. So that's what really set it off.
Right. Yeah. Just having that pain, that discomfort, not having a ready solution drove you to innovate that others could ultimately benefit from it in a
Sure.
large number of ways as well.
Yeah.
I'm understanding. You've mentioned that other ideas you had in the past were brought to market by someone else. How did that history influence your decision to immediately protect this idea, build prototypes, and take ownership of the innovation?
Yeah, thank you. That was a good question as well. Like I said, a lot of opportunities that I had ideas and you don't act on them and you see them later on and you're like, why didn't I do something about that? Why didn't I take ownership of that? Why didn't I go after the IP? You see a couple of those go through and you start to trust your own instincts after a while, especially after working in industry. So it was an educated gut feel where I had an internal moment, a sense of pay attention, Zach. There's some deep stuff that you're coming to understand. and you need to dig, and don't let this opportunity pass you by. So that latent entrepreneur that is inside of me and many people said, get the IP, build brand awareness, build a website, add a store, build prototypes, help people who are screaming on all these user groups about their pain and lack of solutions and frustration with doctors and the healthcare system. So that's what I did. Now, then I realized I might be selling what could be considered a medical device, but to be sure, I stopped selling these devices, but yet I did not stop talking and sharing. And to build my confidence, I delivered at great expense to me personally, more medical MVPs to people all over the USA suffering with various pelvic floor aggravated conditions. We saw some pretty stellar responses from them about their personal control, their improvements, some that even surprised us in a really big way. And that in hindsight, it made total sense.
Right.
This method is used in sports therapy all day long. Our pelvic muscles and tendons and tissues are mostly the same, yet nobody focused on this area because to do it like we do it, it took some serious creativity in product design to make it. And it just seemed like, why not? So that was the moment.
Yeah. Right. And so at some point you realized your invention could be a medical device. I mean, how were you able to answer that question? And, as far as what qualifies as a medical device and needing to go on and get like FDA approval, let's say.
Well, going down how a FDA classifies a device, you can go the simple right route, which is called health and wellness, but you can't make any serious claims. And in order to open up the market and have a bigger opportunity, you really want to be able to make medical claims. You want to understand the deep science by what you're doing. There are a lot of probably health and wellness products that haven't gone through the rigors of clinical trials to try to figure out what they're actually doing. We decided to take the harder route, to build a big corporate moat, bigger challenge from other competitors, and have to address our device as a medical device, because truly there are some things that you would never consider as health and wellness that we can do. So
Mhm.
that's why we've decided to go the medical device route.
Got it. Okay. Now, pelvic pain is often silent and stigmatized. What was the emotional or psychological turning point for you when you realized the scope of suffering and that this could be your drop in the pond to improve healthcare?
Mhm. When one of our user advocates, having found me through the user groups, she drove 6 hours round trip to find out what this thing was about and how it could possibly help her condition. Then after a few months of using it, applied to her really challenging condition called bladder pain syndrome and interstitial cystitis, which absolutely is a medical claim. You couldn't just sell health and wellness for something like this. It's a deeply aggravating and painful, relentless condition. She said, I kept her from committing suicide. And then she said I
Wow.
couldn't have her device back and she wanted to fight me over it. Well, I figured at that point that was pretty amazing. And seeing more and more and more of those kind of experiences, it's like, can you believe that? I mean, if you're going to be able to bring these people down off the edge of checking out, being suicidal, why wouldn't you want to do that? There
Yeah.
are others that express similar emotions and thankfulness and were deep and sincere. And honestly, in my corporate career, I never have received those kind of words or any other business I was ever involved with. So it's kind of like nitromethane to one's motivational engine. It's very explosive,
Yeah.
and it may not be the primary reason that God put me here, but it's a worthy goal and a damn good one to spend the rest of my life if that's what it takes, trying to improve and to be part of healthcare solutions that are safe and simple and dignified. Something very wanting in the industry as we know it today.
Right. No, I really hear that. Yeah, I mean, the feedback you got not only was potentially making people's lives easier, reducing pain, but potentially saving lives as well. And it made that big of an impact to the people who were trying it, and yeah, they're
Yeah,
fighting you
I
for
mean,
it.
people that suffer greatly with these
Yeah.
kind of conditions.
Now,
So.
for listeners who are new to your world, how do you explain the H3 pelvic therapy system, and what problems does it solve that no existing therapy can address effectively?
Well, I like to call it, our human centric. It's holistic and thermally harmonic because we modulate thermal energy. It's enhanced by exquisite engineering sensors, enabling, superior control that gives you access to treat safely, and the beneficial effects of thermal medicine addressing severe pelvic pain conditions is known in the scientific community. We're just harnessing it in a very unique KISS way. It's a win-win-win situation for people who are suffering and for the healthcare community.
Right. Okay. So, as you just mentioned, your device uses controlled thermal modulation to influence TRP channels, literally altering pain signals to the nerve level. What does that process look like in practice, and why is it such a breakthrough compared to medications or surgery?
Yeah, good question. All medications have some type of side effect. Most orally taken medications are systemic and sometimes have undesired side effects. We solve both issues in one device. We apply our therapy local regionally, not systemically, leaving almost zero side effects. And when it works, that's the best medicine. Opioids cause constipation, which is counterintuitive to these kind of conditions. Other synthetic drugs such as amitriptyline, gabapentin leave folks sleeping all day, gaining weight, unrefreshed, and in general miserable. Even the FDA, the only drug approved for the interstitial cystitis that I just mentioned previously, it's been shown to cause retinal degradations. There are lawsuits over this drug.
Oh, wow.
Can you believe that it remains FDA approved? That's
Wow.
all I'll say about that. But in practice, we're applying a known range of safe, consistent thermal energy, local regionally, to both external and internal pelvic pain inducing conditions. When we apply the right thermal dose, time, and temperature, we get very interesting results. It's a lot like the story of the three bears with Goldilocks when she found the baby bear's food was just right, that thermal experience, and she ate it up. And our
Right.
bodies do the same thing. And TRP channels that you mentioned simply are the foundational communication tools of our neurons. Without getting long in the tooth on the matter, suffice it to say that when the right temperature is detected via these channels, they send voltage signals that tell the central nervous system to feel or not to feel pain. And you don't have to go way too cold like Papa Bear soup or way too hot like Mama Bear soup. You just need to make sure you have a lot of it at the perfect ratio. And that is the keeping controlled pain management and healing the sweet spot for our devices. And I hope that makes some sense.
Right. Yeah. So I know, and you've mentioned previously, like that ice is too cold, heat dissipates too quickly, and baths aren't practical. So, tell me a little bit more about how the H3 system delivers precise, safe therapeutic temperatures needed to reduce inflammation, modulate nerves, and accelerate healing.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. Well, we replicate the effects of the hot bath, a sitz bath. Who doesn't love one of those?
Hmm.
On your general condition, I'll say down there, because we do it in a way that allows you not to get wet and you don't lose thermal energy. And you can use it in the convenience of your home on a chair and a sofa in your bed, and it'll stay exactly where you want it for as long as you want it within the safe dosage parameters that is controlled by our software and hardware. Most applications or cold applications are variations of an ice pack or a bag of peas or even condoms filled with water and frozen in a freezer. I mean, can you say rude on your downstairs putting those? They don't call Sub-Zero freezers that name for nothing, because when you pull that thing out, it's probably 18 degrees, and they can cause further damage and pain if it's not if you're not real careful. And I don't know how you can be too careful with that kind of temperature. Yet our systems, we have thermal sensors, ubiquitously known as NTCs, or negative thermal coefficient sensors. They're just simply temperature sensors that are very accurate. They've got a closed feedback loop to our thermal engine. We built in thermal cycling profiles that you can select for your specific condition that may be prescribed by your clinician or physician, or you can do it on your own within limits controlled by the device. Cooling, not freezing, reduces inflammation. It shunts the pain signals to the brain. Common knowledge here. Warming increases blood flow and brings higher concentrations of oxygenated blood to the application. Common knowledge here. Both induce some very interesting scientifically documented mechanisms, a process of increased human restoration or upregulation of our cellular activity. And that's called the hypoxic-hyperoxic paradox. Pretty interesting. Whereas holding a cooling cycle for a set period of time and then holding a warming period for a set period of time induces biological responses, some called HIF-1 alpha or hypoxic induction factor, and venous endothelial growth factors. All of these things are factors that, when applied to healing and applied in a way that's more concentrated, reduces the time that you're going to sit here and suffer in pain and to heal anything that's got, damage, muscle damage, tears, tissue damage.
Right.
Both are seen in the healing process, but our methods accelerate all that drug-free, offering literally a blissful experience and closing the time it takes for your body to restore itself, and all at home.
Right. Yeah, and at a consistent temperature, right? I mean, ice
Yes.
packs will melt and thaw, and
Yep. Make a
heat
mess.
will dissipate as well, but your device maintains that consistent temperature without damaging tissue and et cetera, is what I understand.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
From preclinical safety at Duke to in-home user experiences, what results or stories have convinced you most that this technology could redefine pelvic pain care? I know you told us one story, but what else can you share?
Well, we've had over 30 plus people who have used them. 80% of them have been extremely satisfied with their experience. They had various different conditions, not all the same, but very pelvic centrally located. Duke animal studies were shown that our range of thermal boundaries, I call it the bookends of the thermal energy that we apply without inducing any damage to body tissues, nerves, or adventitia, it's all safe, which is wonderful. You got to have safe. We have safe. And, now we're working on finding funding for the first clinical trial so that now we can begin to show efficacy.
Yeah.
And of course, that first trial will be the basis from which we can go to the next and the next and the next indication.
So you're at the beginning stages or looking to secure funding to enter the clinical trial.
Correct.
Okay. Now you've said chronic pelvic pain may affect as many people as diabetes even, yet it's rarely talked about. Why do you think this massive medical need has been overlooked for so long?
Well, I'd like to say it's not overlooked. It's just very complex and it's hard to offer a simple solution. Many of the conditions that we're talking about, they have overlap. You might have two or three that you could put a name on it. You almost need a shotgun approach, but you need to do it in a local regional application, not necessarily a shotgun systemic way. I don't know about you, but I've never wanted to talk about my pain down there. And who does? Yet we all have it at some point likely, and it's a partly a social taboo to discuss. Have you ever tried to get a new device and method to be approved by the FDA? I mean, that might answer your question too as to why you haven't seen it. It's not easy to get these things cleared.
Right.
I think a lot of it has to do with the taboo subject, the difficulty
Right.
of discussing it. Yeah.
People not wanting to talk about it because it's private
Right.
or embarrassing or that kind of thing. Yeah. And you mentioned conditions that this device helps support, like vulvodynia, interstitial cystitis, fissures, prostatitis, and they have limited treatment options, but often devastating impacts. From your perspective, what are the biggest gaps in current medical approaches?
Well, I see the gaps that I see are right now, there's less time to visit with your clinician. When you wait 26 days or 3 to 4 weeks, sometimes 5 to 6 weeks to see your doctor, he's got only 10 minutes. And then in 10 minutes, you walk out the door with ill-prescribed medications, antibiotics that he doesn't really know whether you have something going on. Or, like I said, the previous mind-bending drugs that turn your nerves off in your brain, they're masking root cause, but they might even be adding more misery. So sometimes screwing with something else up in a totally unrelated area, a very lack of dignified and empathetic solutions for these victims of pelvic pain. I mean, these people truly are being victimized by their own bodies. We empathize deeply with them.
Yeah. Now, the H3 system is designed for home use, but keeps clinicians connected through smart tracking and decentralized clinical trial capabilities. How does this shift the paradigm for physicians, hospitals, and patients?
No, that's a big question. Well, these patients, the seriously afflicted ones, they're extremely frustrated. Doctors don't really care to deal with them. I know that sounds terrible, but having a remotely monitored system would enable the clinician to see usage patterns without even having to communicate with the patient, number one. But if and when they want to connect, enabling the telehealth visits for extremely remote settings, we're there. We enable that through our device. It shifts to the paradigm for hospitals because they can offer earlier exits. Hospitals save tons of cash each day that they can open up a bed back up. So if you can leave early for, that's a big savings to the hospital. They can redirect their ER visits that might be very costly I mean, these people show up in the ER or they don't need to be there. They really need something to go home with and try to self-treat. By offering the tool to the user to go home and not sit in the ER room for 10 hours and get nothing. I mean, that's a big help. Another huge savings to the hospital setting. Clinicians will now be seen now as a friend rather than a foe. One that has empathy and concern, because it's really what these patients, they need that. I mean, obviously they need to be healed, the root cause, but they need to feel like they're heard.
Right.
I'll give you another one real quick. New mothers that suffer from inoperable externally thrombosing hemorrhoids. They're left to suffer and writhe in pain. It's terrible. It's a common condition when pregnant.
Yeah.
They don't have to suffer anymore. It's wonderful.
Right. Yeah. And I think the solution right now is like the sitz bath that you mentioned earlier, which is not convenient because you have to it's wet and, you can't do that anywhere in your home.
You're hanging out in space. We give you positive pressure. We not only provide the therapy, but we're pushing things back where they should be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now you're working with institutions like Duke, Wake Forest, and UNC. How are clinicians responding to this technology, and what excites them most from a research or treatment standpoint?
Well, I would say they get it. They see the value of less drugs, addressing root cause, and giving them a new tool to show their patients that they really care. Truly, they don't really want to give out drugs. I think most of them want to practice as best they can the do no harm. We exemplify the do no harm opportunity. Many of them want to do more studies with our devices and therapies. And I'll give you an example. We're working to build a team from UNC, Wake Forest University, University of Alabama, Virginia Commonwealth, to get support for an ARPA-H project to do a massive study of our devices and methods as applied to the space of female vaginal microbiome. I know it's another biggie. So much I could say about that, but they want to better understand how this affects their space of expertise, and they're very jacked up about that. They're very interested to see how this translates, how this turns out.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That sounds exciting. Yeah. And promising.
It does.
Now you've chosen a strategic path of non-dilutive funding, careful IP protection, and selective investment. How has this shaped your go-to-market strategy, and what does the right investor look like for a company in your stage?
Non-dilutive obviously protects our equity for the right fortunate lead investor. Excuse that term, but we want to be the virgin for our Prince Charming, and they'll appreciate that when that day comes. So non-dilutive helps us to prove that we are worthy. It allows further de-risking. These are all factors that investors really want to have and want to feel comfortable with. But it keeps us moving forward with our commercialization plan. And IP protection, ours is strong and broad. You got to have it. All I'll say about that, because ultimately you hope you never have to use it.
Right.
But the right investor is going to require that. And they're the one that's going to bring deep industry experience, a Rolodex of contacts to help accelerate our efforts. And that'll be a breath of fresh air in addition to our board oozing of optimism and wisdom in the space. And of course, the funds to drive the acceleration. One who will be the right investor, but one who understands term sheets. They'll have a fair set of terms that we can pass along to the next and the next and the next investor as we grow. And we're not opposed to a strategic, but we're probably way too early for that conversation right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, for innovators listening, especially those in medical device development, what are the biggest lessons you've learned about market validation, regulatory pathways, and avoiding the fall in love with your own idea trap?
Well, I would say if you don't have customers, you have no market. Early market validation in both patient and clinician combined for us has enabled and emboldened us to continue on this path. This arduous pathway at times of drafting grant applications for more non-dilutive, then tracking the money and all the project progress, writing papers, proving your science. All these efforts are part of being a company anyway. So, this is good training for us. The market is all of the stakeholders, not just some lackey with a wallet and pain to solve. Our regulatory pathway, de novo, as FDA made clear in our pre-submission meetings, is forcing us into a clinical trial. So without evidence documented in the right way, you're not going to get your clearance and you're dead in the water. Right. So when I say fall in love with your own idea, well, who doesn't do that in the beginning until you start asking your friends and they say, hey, that's stupid or that's crazy. Maybe they don't understand, or maybe they should be the ones you should be listening to. I've seen many of investors lose their shorts falling in love with their own ideas. And I think some of the best ideas are the simplest. the most, to quote, I could have had a V8 idea. And in my opinion, H3Pelvic, for all of the reasons above, in my opinion, we have a massive V8.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like you said, you have an audience who really needs the device and can benefit it. So you have that
A
market
real pain point.
identified, and the opportunity is there.
Yes.
Now, yeah, it's just securing the funding and moving into those clinical trials. Now, fast forward 5 years, H3 pelvic therapy has achieved what you envisioned. What has changed for patients, for clinicians, and for the millions suffering in silence today?
Leanne, I love your questions. If I had to give you one word, I'd say choice. Patients will have a choice. Even if they don't have insurance, they can have the choice to take immediate control of their suffering and come down off the ledge of these suicidal thoughts, not being in control, not being bound by the limits of a pharma-only physician visit. And they may find out it's the best decision they ever made. That will be one that offers less anguish and more control of their health care. And if we can just help one more person, just one, lose the idea that their life is not worth living, we want to be the agent of change for that person. I mean, is that not a purpose-driven business idea? It is for us. And I will finish this statement up with, I'm sure there are many people here on your podcast that probably take exception with Robert Kennedy Jr., but he did say something that is so appropriate and needs repeating. He said, those with good health, they have many dreams. Those with bad health, they have one dream. And we want to help people have more dreams by taking their own control of their health in a small but a very effective way.
Right. Yeah, like you said, choice and chronic pain, like you mentioned, it just overrides everything. If you're suffering with chronic pain, it's hard to live a normal life. It's hard to accomplish anything else because you're dealing with that. And so I get that. I hear the passion in your voice and definitely appreciate that, and wish you all the success in getting this product to market.
Well, thank you, Leanne. I really appreciate the time you've taken to learn more, and we'll look forward to talking again sometime soon.
Yeah, no, it's been an incredible, eye-opening conversation. Zach, so where can people learn more about your product and reach you if they have questions?
Yeah, so just to let your listeners know, our product is still not FDA cleared, so we're not in the market just yet. But you can learn more about our devices at h3pelvic.com. That's H, the number 3, pelvic.com. There is a investor side that has lots of really interesting audio podcasts that are kind of fun to listen to with respect to certain indications. They can go there and learn as much as they'd like. And if for any of those that are interested in being part of our success in the future, you can reach me at Zack.Lyon, that's ZACK period LYON at H, the number 3, pelvic, PELVIC.com. That's my email, and that'll get to me directly.
All right. Well, thank you again, Zach. Yeah, wonderful conversation. To everyone tuning in, thank you for joining us on Industry Ignited. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and check out the next conversation. Until next time, stay bold, stay curious, and keep igniting industry.